Please welcome Wes Lutz, Chairman of NADA.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dave. Right now, I don't think you're asking enough critical questions of our more disruptive partners. We're not challenging enough assertions. You're not asking for enough proof to back up the hype. And you're missing a lot of non-sexy things that will truly define what will happen with the future of personal transportation in this country. As a result, the automotive press is not defining the narrative. You're letting the narrative be defined for you by companies that have the biggest financial stake in the outcome. I think we can do better. I think we need to do better. Each one of these narratives might sound right, but the truth is that each one is built on a false or unproven pretense. And these narratives are put out there by stakeholders that have an obvious incentive for them to be true, even if they aren't. A month and a half ago, the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety released a study that caused me to stop dead in my tracks. It found that the cost of relying on ride-hailing services as a primary mode of transportation in the 20 biggest metro areas in the US was at minimum twice as expensive as the cost of owning a personal vehicle, which means that if you don't have to pay for parking annually, relying exclusively on ride-hailing services is nearly 3 times more expensive than owning a vehicle. I gotta tell you, I think this was one of the biggest auto stories in 2018, and it received only a smattering of coverage. This should have been all over the front page news. It should have been in Detroit, at Wall Street Journal, Silicon Valley. Why? Because it disproves one of the central pillars holding up the argument that people are going to stop buying cars, that it's cheaper to use ride-hail services. It shows that ride-hailing is substantially more expensive than personal vehicle ownership, even a new car. And if Uber and Lyft are dramatically more expensive than personal vehicles, then people aren't going to stop buying cars, and the auto industry isn't doomed. Instead, people are going to continue doing exactly what they're doing now, owning a car or truck for day in and day out personal transportation, and using ride-hailing services when it makes more sense than driving. That's not a revolution, it's an evolution. Because I know how my customers define transportation freedom. They define it by having the ability at any moment to go where they want, when they want. They want the ability to make multiple stops on errand runs, take an impromptu trip to another city or state, drive unexpectedly to the emergency room, or leave an event later or earlier than planned. They don't want to add wait time to these equations. And in many instances, they just can't afford to. In short, people want the freedom, flexibility, convenience, and control that only owning their own car or truck can provide. It's the same reason the whole country didn't stop this morning, wake up and take a taxi to wherever they were headed. And it's the same reason they aren't going to do that tomorrow or the next day. In August, Bloomberg reported that a number of self-driving proponents were encouraging the industry and government to rally around an initiative to retrain, get this, humans on how to cross the street. I'm sorry, it makes me laugh every time I read that. Bloomberg quoted a time-learning expert who runs a venture fund that invests in AI-enabled companies. And he said that, quote, "The problem isn't that self-driving cars don't work, it's that people act unpredictably." In other words, we're crossing the street the wrong way. You know, after reading that, I can't help but ask this question. If the safety promise of self-driving vehicles is dependent upon reprogramming the behavior of human pedestrians, why don't we just reprogram another group of humans right now? Human drivers. And reprogram them to always wear a seatbelt, not to speed, not drive drunk, not to text or fiddle with the radio, or reach behind the seat to pick up the Cheerios the kids just threw at them. Wouldn't we just save as many lives that way? And wouldn't it save a lot of time and money in the process? Yes, there were 37,000 fatalities on the road last year, but Americans drove more than 3.2 trillion miles. Does anyone want to do the math? Of course not. You went to journalism school to avoid math. But any guesses? How many vehicle miles are driven in the US before every motor vehicle death? 500,000? A million? 10 million? Nearly 90 million. 90 million miles. So the conventional wisdom that has taken hold is that humans aren't good drivers. But the reality is humans are phenomenally good drivers. Here are the questions you should be asking automakers, regulators, and safety advocates now. What technologies are coming online in the next 5 years that will reduce driving facilities that don't involve removing steering wheels, brake pedals, or humans? In the discussion over autonomous vehicles, those answers should matter, don't you think? So my challenge to you here is the same. When you hear assertions, ask for proof. Don't be afraid to ask the billion-dollar question. Is it possible that the person making this bold assertion has a financial stake in having it regarded as true in the short term? Because here's the ugly truth. If the people in this room don't ask these questions, it's possible nobody will. First, let me make it abundantly clear. I want to sell anything my customers want to buy, period. It could be powered by turtles. I don't care. If there's a demand for it, I want it in my showroom. In fact, there is nothing more that I would like to do than sell every American a new electric vehicle. You know where I make my service revenue? Tires, brakes, suspensions, alignments, and electrical systems. And the last time I checked, you know what EVs have? Tires, brakes, suspensions, steering systems, and electrical systems. In fact, there's a theory that as EVs start spending some time as part of the regular fleet in measurable numbers, and in particular as primary vehicles that get driven every day, they're going to need tires and brakes and suspension work and alignments at a greater interval than ICE vehicles because they are heavier and they can accelerate a whole lot faster than similar vehicles with conventional engines and drivetrains. NADA is not aware of a single study or data set out there that can substantiate even partially this theory. And that's because there just aren't enough real-world EV miles out there to study, let alone draw any meaningful conclusions from. Again, it kind of sounds true and is super interesting, but that's just not good enough, or at least it shouldn't be. So the next time you hear or are told that dealers don't want to sell EVs because they are going to lose service revenue, I want you to respond, how do you know that? Show me what you're looking at that proves that, because I want to know that as much as anyone. There was a good amount of national and regional coverage of a July report by former Deputy Transportation Commissioner for New York City, Bruce Saylor, who found that transportation network companies have added 5.7 billion miles of driving to the nation's 9 largest metro areas. Most critically to the traffic debate, Saylor found that Uber and Lyft private rides put 2.8 new vehicle miles on the road for each mile of personal driving they removed. He even found that shared rides put 2.6 new miles on the road for every mile of personal driving removed. And this is because the majority of people aren't taking Uber and Lyft instead of driving themselves. They're taking Uber and Lyft instead of using public transportation, biking, or walking. Look, I get it. We are not only living in exciting times, but also in an area that rewards bold predictions more than gritty reality, especially when reality isn't that exciting. But I don't think it's a bridge too far to expect reporting in our industry to always be rooted in reality and facts as we know them today, not the spin that gets Wall Street all jazzed up. And there's no shortage of spins today. So you can't go to an automotive or tech conference today without hearing about the end of personal vehicle ownership. But I'm asking you, question the hype, ask for the proof, and find out what they're not telling you. The future will work itself out regardlessly. I just want us to be informed in the meantime. So, thank you very much for your time and attention. I'd be happy to take questions.